paid out not in dollars, but in more ounces of gold. To top it off, there are 0 vault fees. So stop having your metal just sit there. Upgrade to monetary metals today and start earning interest on it. Upgrade at interestongold.com/David. That's interestongold.com/David. From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Garnosky. Welcome back to the program, the show that gets things done, neighbor to neighbor. Nothing like it in broadcast media today. That's why we're paving a new path, a new kind of conversation. And we have to role model it as best as we can. And that means we're not going to get stuck on the news cycle. The news cycle represents the problem, which is politics, dividing us, tearing us apart, tearing up our families. We're not going to have that anymore. We're here to bring a new solution, which is you and I looking for solutions right under our noses in the free market, in the free space of creativity, art, innovation, science and technology, and things that are of the mind, things that deal with learning, like anthropology, things like that. We get into everything on this program. So sometimes you'll have our chief science advisor join us, who's one of the top physicists in the world, revolutionizing physics in the way he simplifies and unifies various fields in the world of physics. You'll hear him, Dr. Yu, on Thursdays for our Science and You edition of the program. Sometimes you'll hear world-class economists, like the folks like Jeff Dice, who joins us for a great exploration into Mises Institute-style economic theory and development of markets, how they work. And then other times we'll go in towards the world of art, the world of culture, the world of entertainment, because we have filmmakers, we have composers like Stephen Limbaugh on the program, great classical composer there. And those are always great to hear from because we need all these different symphony of voices to really capture what resonates in the human heart. And that is not just the same narrow bandwidth. You know, you get on these politics shows and it's just the same, oh, who said what, she said this, he said this, blah, 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 blah. What are we doing to make the next amazing piece of architecture? What are we doing to make the next movie that just stirs the heart and just stays with people for generations? What are we doing to make the next flying car? We haven't had that yet, I guess. We got to work on that. I think there's somebody out there doing something. But anyways, to do that, we have a local filmmaker in the Bay Area with us, someone who shares my interest in things like anthropology and technology, but uses his skill as a filmmaker to capture and convey some of these ideas. We have John Croft with us. How you doing, John?
Hey, brother. How are you?
Great to have you on the radio here on A Neighbor's Choice.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. So John, what are some of the things that motivate you? Why are you a filmmaker? Let's start there. Why do you like to make movies?
Well, I'm a storyteller. I'm a producer, director, writer. I get stories a lot. I'm an idea person, which is a lot of the reason I also discuss things like politics and government and all kinds of things. I don't think artists are supposed to exclusively just relegate themselves to little stories. For example, I really like that you discuss Renee Girard. And I think he's a thinker that a lot of people still don't know very much about. Very relevant thinker. And anthropologist, correct?
Yeah. He was a late professor at Stanford University. He passed away in 2015. And he created mimetic theory, which kind of tries to make sense of so much of the social behaviors of mob mentality and crowd behavior and groupthink and those things that we try to explore in our show. But as an artist, what do you like about the work of Renee Girard, since you bring him up?
Well, that's one of the things he explored, I think, isn't it? He discussed in literary terms why the stories we talk about keep repeating over and over, why they're so relevant to mankind. Shakespeare, I think he focused on Shakespeare a lot as well. Mm-hmm. But mimetic desire was a lot of what he discussed, and I think that's very interesting. just touched on mob violence, for example, and that's entirely mimetic, isn't it?
Yeah, you got to wonder when you see the scenes. It's been the top story of a lot of news today online is Senator Rand Paul and his wife, and they're getting screamed at and pushed around by this vicious, angry mob. And I'm thinking to myself, how many of these folks, do they know what they're doing, right? I mean, here's a man who has fought his entire career to end mass incarceration, to get rid of no-knock raids, like what happened with Breonna Taylor. It's like, this is one of your allies. Why would you want to hurt him?
He's substantially doing something for them, actually.
Yeah. So that's a great example, you're right, of people who are caught up in a mob, in a mimetic, which just means you're copying what everybody else is doing. Do you think if we could take some of those individuals screaming and pushing at his wife and him and just sit them down individually, you think we could help them kind of see what we're saying here? This is an ally of yours, you know?
Yeah, I think you'd have to do that. You'd have to drill down individually. But, you know, a lot of these kids have been, I guess, taught in schools, in our schools, things like, you know, collectivist ideologies like Marxism and things like this. They don't believe that thinking yourself is going to get very far, or doing things yourself. And I think many of them don't believe in the American dream as a result. They think that, I think our experiment of freedom in here in America didn't really result in much besides their own lack of enrichment. I think many of them just think of themselves, and they're not seeing the benefit to society. They're not comparing themselves, for example, to the rest of the world. They're not comparing our time in history compared to the rest of the world. In the last thousands and thousands of years of struggle we've had to gain freedom. Do they want to just destroy that? Do they want to get rid of that? What does that mean? You know, there's due process. There's rule of law. These are concepts that I don't know if they know what they are. And it's not to belittle the group. I think that they're trying to do good things. In fact, I believe in police reform. I think these are good ideas, you know. But how you get there makes a world of difference. And Ron Paul was somebody who brought me into libertarianism, by the way, which is why I think of him whenever I think of the Pauls. But Rand is trying to do something about it. He's trying to actually reform the police and the prison system, et cetera. But personally, I myself as an artist, I know you asked about me as an artist. Of course, I always have projects going on, writing, but I also think of lately, because of what's been going on with coronavirus, I've been thinking about the future of our country. I've been thinking about, I guess as a libertarian, I see the weaknesses in democracy. And I think that's a golden calf that a lot of people don't like to attack. But, you know, us as libertarians, we're willing to do that often. But I think that democracy is nearing its end. And I think, you know, I hope that doesn't sound scary to people, but because I think if it was up to the mob, we would get something more collectivist the way we've had. But as a libertarian, I think we need to go closer and dig in closer to individualism, closer to libertarianism. I personally ascribe to voluntarism, where each individual person has something to say in the government. You could say very simply that it's subjecting the government to market forces. So,
and I think a lot of folks are there on a lot of different issues, whether it's education. People want more choice in education. If it's medical choices right now, people are worried about government mandating only one type of medicine. And I think a lot of folks in the conservative heartland are seeing people say, hey, you can't use hydroxychloroquine. Oh, you can't use Z-Pak for this or that. You can't talk about these things. And they're saying, wait a second, I want my choice. I don't want a monopoly telling me there's only one medicine and you got to wait for it when we tell you it's ready and just shut your mouth in the meantime, including doctors. So people functionally want choice in most of their lives. And I think we should have that conversation about how far does that go and what that looks like. I myself don't call myself a libertarian because I think that these things that I believe in are from Christianity itself. I don't even have to go to Enlightenment era thinkers like John Locke, but I do see the value in that tradition, and part of this conversation is working out how that looks like. So I want to go back to something you said, though, because you said that you said that, well, the group that is screaming and yelling at people, that they have a lot of good heart in some of the things they believe in, but they don't believe in the American dream. So that implies that you believe in the American dream. So what do you believe? What is the American dream to you?
Well, there's a cultural bit of history there, but and I'm not interested in getting into the history too much of it, as much as just the concept, the general concept of it. I think that general concept is all wrapped up in freedom. I don't think there's anything else to the American dream much but freedom. Freedom gives you the right to do, historically everyone wanted a piece of land where they could make a farm and and worship God as they saw fit, etc. And that was kind of the American dream back in the day. It changed to like 2.5 kids and all these things, which is more modern thinking. But I think it's more about just freedom. And freedom means you can do either one. You can get a piece of land and live out or you can live in the suburbs, or you can live in the city, or you can do. The options are limitless, except for harming your neighbor. And that's, as a libertarian, we have this thing called the non-aggression principle, which is one of the only laws we really ultimately believe in, which is basically the golden rule. And you can do pretty much anything you want as long as you don't hurt your neighbor, which is one of the reasons I love your show, A Neighbor's Choice. I think that's really important today to think about on an individual level. But I think that's what the American dream is about. It's about pursuing your own interests and not harming your neighbor, but benefiting society actually as well as you can. Because that's actually what capitalism and the free market is about. Think about it. If you don't make a business that benefits people, what happens to it? It goes bankrupt, right? So that's what market forces are. That's what they do. And the beauty of it is that you don't need the golden ring of power to do anything, to have anything to do with it. You don't have to wield power to benefit society. All you have to do is allow people to work in the marketplace freely, and the market sorts people out itself. And it does so very efficiently as well. So I really think that, for example, many, many government services can be reduced, if not eliminated entirely, by using private market forces and private companies who compete. Oh, what does that mean, they compete? Well, that means they get better and better. Okay, they get better, but isn't that expensive? No, actually it means it reduces in price. This is what market forces do. And instead what we get is, Obamacare. Oh, you can, have your doctor. Oh, sorry, you can't have your doctor. Oh, is there anything that you can do about that? No, there's no recourse. So you don't have a choice, as you've said. Choice is very important here as it comes to reducing your price, reducing and increasing the quality of services. If we want good services, I don't know about the rest of the world. I've heard complaints about universal health care just as much as I've heard compliments. But what I have seen is that America as an economic system has dwarfed any other system in the world for over 100 years. So that's a fact.
Right.
So
well, let's hold that thought. We're speaking with John Croft. He's a filmmaker in the St. Pete area. We're going to expand on this idea about choice from a artist's perspective, from a everyday citizen's perspective, from every kind of perspective we can, to unlock how important it is and how this idea affects so much of the problems that divide us today. We'll continue in just a moment. And I want you to remember, you can visit our website on neighborschoice.com. You can email us, hello@aneighborschoice.com. Send us a comment, send us a question. We always love hearing from you. And you can catch interviews with artists like John Croft and politicians like Ron Paul and bishops like N.T. Wright and a whole host of other voices by going to our website, neighborschoice.com. Back in just a moment. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals, join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Hello, this is David Gronowski, host of A Neighbor's Choice. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute, on my program each week, dissecting the news and making the case for freedom, capitalism, and a family-friendly society. Now you can join Jeff and I this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event at the Azalea Lodge in the Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Noted scholar Dr. Patrick Newman and Jeff Deist will provide a fun pre-election discussion along with light refreshments. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute. It's just $20 to get in, and space is limited. Join us this Saturday at 9 a.m. at Azalea Lodge at Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Go to Mises.org to register. That's Mises.org. See you there this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event.
Some students are tackling more than just their schoolwork, which is why more than 30% of them aren't graduating. But with a boost from you, 100% of them will have a better chance to make it to graduation. Go to boostup.org to find out how to give the high school students in your community the boost they need to make it through. Brought to you by the U.S. Army and the Ad Council.
Our monetary system is failing. Negative interest rates, growing debt, highly speculative market, and the dollar is being devalued by the Fed. Investing your wealth has never been more challenging. Who wants to earn just 1% interest annually in a savings account? Or 0.5% with a 10-year U.S. Treasury bond? Or invest in the S&P at its height and in the middle of a pandemic? Thankfully, there is another option, monetary metals. They pay interest on gold in gold with no storage costs ever. That's 2 to 4.5% annual interest on gold and silver paid out not in dollars, but in ounces and with zero vault fees. Upgrade to monetary metals today. Visit interestongold.com/David. That's interestongold.com/David. A Neighbor's Choice is live. I'm your host, David Gronowski. Glad to have you with us across the Sunshine State worldwide on our podcast and video live stream. And we're joined now by John Croft, who's a filmmaker in the Tampa Bay area and a friend of mine, someone who's really passionate about some of the same issues. I wanted to dive more into the storytelling aspect of your work. But first, I want to take a moment to give a shout out to Oakley Transport, which you've heard in some of my recent programs. OakleyTransport.com is their website, where they're looking for fantastic heroes who want to serve their fellow neighbor in a time in which we saw food shortages. Sometimes the first time people have seen this in America because of the lockdown political situation, where there were food runs and difficulties with distribution. And a lot of folks at Oakley Transport, their drivers picked up their their keys, they got their boots on, and they hit the road going a long distance to help their fellow neighbor have food stocked on the shelves. And that's an underdog kind of story, because sometimes you don't realize the work that people are doing behind the scenes to make your life comfortable. And that's one of the beautiful things about a market, is that folks can choose to get into activities that can serve their neighbor, and they don't need to be credited as the hero. They don't need the TV, the lights, the camera. Politicians, they like to take credit for everything that happens, but it's the folks behind the scenes, like the drivers at OakleyTransport.com, that are making things move and making us have the functional society that we have, that we can thrive in together. So if you're looking for a great opportunity, if you're a driver and you've got the credentials, CDLA license, you want to go to OakleyTransport.com and check them out. Be a part of serving your neighbor using your talents as a driver. So, John, I wanted to, follow back with you about, as a filmmaker, you see, heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Some people are filmmakers, some people are drivers, some people are electricians. There's all kinds of talent that are just out there. But what you're saying is that if we unleash choice rather than edicts, that's the way we unleash the best in us, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, look at China, for example. China has to steal our intellectual property. Why do they have to do that? Don't they have the might of the communist system behind them? Like we hear with coronavirus, they were able to direct their economy in this way and that way so easily. Well, then isn't that a good system? Well, then why did they have to steal because we rely on innovation in our country to make things work. And why do we do that? Well, we don't do that purposefully. We just allow it. That's all we do. It's like laissez-faire capitalism, right? Laissez-faire means hands off. That's really all it means. And so that means you, as, someone working in the marketplace, you can come up with new stuff, innovative stuff. As an artist, if someone's always telling me, oh, no, you can't paint it that way, you have to paint it this way and that way and that way, well, it's going to limit my creativity. It's going to limit how I think about what I'm trying to accomplish. And I really am a believer in kind of more free thinking, and kind of taking things where they naturally seem to want to go. For example, when I'm shooting something, like a movie, and I'm shooting like a movie, and I'm one of these directors who, once I'm done with a take, I feel like it's not done yet. Everything on the script has been performed for the scene, but the actor often is still in the scene, acting as kind of like as that character. And my cinematographer is sitting there with his camera going, okay, are we done? He's like looking at me like, are we? And I'm like, no, let it roll. Let it roll. That's what naturally occurs when you're an artist. Beautiful things come out of that. And the same thing's true in the marketplace of ideas, and this is why we don't have to steal our stuff around the world. We have it right here. And what it really is the wealth of freedom we have here.
John,
I think we can do better.
Let's hold that thought. We're going to take a quick news break. But when we continue, we're going to continue to unpack this and understand what this choice factor means for building the kind of civilization we all want, where we can win-win instead of lose-lose. Right now, we've got lose-lose. We need win-win solutions. Back in a moment, live on a Neighbor Show.
You know what time of year it is.
Hurricane conditions in the next 36 hours.
And you know what hurricanes can do.
Devastating damage expected.
Well, we want you to know, no matter how bad things get,
Power outages.
This is life-threatening.
you can stay up to date with the latest information here your home for news, talk, and information. And remember, we'll keep an eye on the tropics. You keep an ear on us.
Got batteries in the flashlight.
The all-new News Talk 1040 WHBO.
Yeah, we got our radio.
He says a mouthful in 3 seconds.
That was the strongest storm to ever strike Louisiana.
Governor John Bel Edwards just back from a flight around the state looking at all the destruction from Hurricane Laura. At least 10 people are dead. There's just been a power outage update from the utilities, which report about 620,000 outages in Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas. Facebook says it's removed the Kenosha Guard page and an event page they organized, calling for people to come out and defend property in Kenosha, Wisconsin, during the protest following the shooting of Jacob Blake. Blake remains in the hospital. Officials in Kenosha are saying things remain calm in the city after nights of protesting, some a bit violent. Police Chief Dan Miskinis.
We ask for everybody's help in stopping the violence, assisting the investigations, so we can hold those accountable in a court of law.
The first reinfection case of coronavirus has been confirmed in the U.S. by a lab in Nevada. Positive cases rising in 11 states. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
Folks, you always know who's losing an argument when one person's making a persuasion case and the other person's trying to violently attack people. And that's what we saw last night, and we continue to see, in which the left doesn't know how to have a conversation. They don't know how to yell and scream and attack. And we just can't have that. You know, Senator Rand Paul has done more, in his little, his one finger than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have ever done for vulnerable folks, for people who are locked up for nonviolent crimes. His record is 1,000, 1,000,000. It's not even in the same league in terms of taking care of the vulnerable. And yet these poor young folks, a lot of these guys are, rich kids, and they just are angry, and they don't know what to do with their anger. And they don't know how to manage that rage. They don't know why they have the rage. They just feel self-righteous, and they want to scapegoat somebody. And so you look at someone like Senator Rand Paul, and he's done more to help stop wars, which would kill people of color around the world, and stop the drug war, which is locking up people of color and killing people in bad police situations, both for the police and the people that are trying to, continue the drug trade in a prohibition atmosphere. He's done more than anybody on the Democratic ticket. He's done more than anybody in the mainstream of the Democratic Party. And yet he gets accosted, he gets belittled, he gets marginalized. But thankfully, we have a decentralized media atmosphere in which somebody can depict that. Because before, when we had 3 TV networks, they could massage reality and you'd never know it happened, which I'm sure they're trying actively to do by not allowing the society to see the ugliness of a mob against an individual. John Croft is my guest. He's a filmmaker, director, producer in the St. Pete area. John, it's kind of like it's because we're playing in the sandbox of Jesus, I say, that this kind of story always backfires. So, for example, my whole thing is Jesus is persecuted by his own in-crowd of his time. And he's cast out of the camp. He's marginalized. He's mocked. He's convicted of a nonviolent crime. He's lied about. He's humiliated. And he's ultimately murdered outside the camp. And because that story is so powerful, because that story is so powerful, it transmits through history. And it saturates our imagination. It saturates our storytelling ability. It saturates our media narratives, such that when a camera depicts someone like Rand Paul being accosted by a crowd, it flips that narrative into the zeitgeist of Jesus being persecuted by an individual. And the same goes for the unjust police situations in which people depict people like George Floyd wrongfully being put in that position with the knee on his neck. And again, a camera captures it. And just like the Christ story, the community revolts against the persecuting crowd. And that comes in various shapes and sizes. And every political party tries to harness that Jesus-style narrative. Whether they're not saying it, but that's what they're functionally doing. They're trying to harness that Jesus aesthetic for their political efforts. So the RNC did that with the David Dorn, the man who was shot while trying to protect stores from being looted in the St. Louis area. He was a man who was a great man, and they had his wife represent his story. And so the community that watches that on television is captivated because here we have one being persecuted and sacrificed by a crazed crowd. And that story comes from Christianity, and that's why all of our media fights are all about trying to, more effectively tell that story so that they can have more power. You see what I mean?
Absolutely. It's winding down, and eventually there'll be no excuse for this behavior. And, it's all going to come down to what you think about Christ eventually. Do you agree that he was innocent or not? But yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. I think it's incredibly important for people to understand how important it is to their lives. I think we often really dismiss it as a myth, right? But the wrong kind of myth. It's not the kind of myth that's important to your life. The kind of myth that's like, not so relevant. As C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were doing, they were doing mythopoeia, these mythical tales that were really more true than truth. They were truer than life. And that's why they're so relevant. That's one of the reasons I'm into film and art is these kinds of stories pretty much changed my life.
Well, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So you're analyzing the news media like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But you're a filmmaker, you're a director, you're a producer, you're trying to tell a story. So as a filmmaker, I want you to analyze the aesthetic of the news media for me. They've got cameras, they've got stories, they've got hot mics, they're recording people, they've got, stories they're printing in the newspaper. They're, in some sense, they're an artist like you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what do you think of the art of so much of the corporate press? They have a kind of playbook. They have preferences. Much of the media is they're on the side of social justice and politically correct ideology, right? And they shape their camera lenses in that direction. Let me give you an example. Another guy who was in D.C. yesterday was a guy who is a friend. I've had him on the program, Mike Harlow, who works with the Walk Away movement. These are folks who are liberal or leftist, but they've walked away from that ideology. And I've had him on the program, but he is a person in the LGBT community, but he was being accosted by a bunch of protesters at the D.C. event last night, and they were throwing all kinds of name calling and calling him names and gay slurs and things like that, and getting in their face and slapping their cameras and things and being aggressive. Now, because he is not a leftist, the mainstream media will not make that story that big of a deal because it doesn't fit their agenda. If he was a leftist and there were Trump supporters saying the names that they were calling him, it would be the biggest story. Trump would have to answer for it. Everybody in the right would be talking. It would be the total biggest story of the month or week or whatever. They would make it as big as they can. But because it's a person who's an independent thinker who doesn't subscribe to the victim mentality of the left, they won't probably cover it all. It just will spread because of social media. Why do you think the media does it that way? Why can't they tell the story of the victim in an honest way? When a group is persecuting one, they only tell it when it's in the agenda that they're trying to push. Why can't they be more fair in standing for the side of the persecuted, even if it's a Trump supporter or a libertarian or an independent?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that they have their own narrative. They're kind of commenting on what's happening in the world through their own lens. And I think that we're all a little bit biased and bigoted in some way. Maybe prejudice is a better term. I don't know. But for us to think that the media is objective is pretty foolish. So I think they've entered into the world where they're not really the news anymore. They're giving commentary, and as an artist, you're telling a story, and you're telling it from a certain perspective, and you're giving enough information in the beginning of the story often to know who the good guys and the bad guys are.
Right.
We don't really have that. We have to decide whose side we're going to be on, but then we have to really learn enough about the story and enough about the people involved and enough about the situation to then come up with some kind of solution. But too often we are judging the people and the situation way too quickly, and we're taking people's word, we're taking the media's angle when we're not willing to think about things ourselves. And that generally, I think, means we're going to be made a fool of later on when somebody corrects us and says, this is actually not accurate. Sadly, it appears that the media has been more inaccurate than I've ever seen in history, and blatantly so. So I think people need to really start digging into the facts of a lot of these things. They have power, and they're using that power to send people off in directions that are very dangerous. I remember when certain people of being dangerous in their rhetoric, and I'm sorry, but that's literally the opposite happening. They are being very dangerous in their rhetoric. And a lot of people rely on them for their worldview. They don't have some other perspective telling them what to think. They have the news media. I mean, how many, I am happy that we don't have the three networks, as you were saying before. I'm happy that we have more than that with the internet. The internet's changed a lot more things than we think it has. It's changed culture in such a way. And maybe that's why we have so much pushback now against the media.
Yeah.
I think people should probably consider why that is.
But I don't think there's a difference between what you're doing and what the news media does. There's no difference.
Not really, except I'm not claiming that what I'm doing is news.
But that's it. So the only difference is that they're branding themselves a different way. They're artists, and they have a story. Like you said, if they tell a story, they give you backstory, so you know who the good ones are and who the bad ones are. So in their character script, folks like Barack Obama are saints. He can go to Libya. He can make a mess of Libya. He can make a mess of Syria. He can make a mess of Yemen. He can make a mess of Afghanistan. But because he is a designated good guy in their character plot, he will always be depicted like he's Mickey Mouse. Like he's I'm just so wholesome.
They won't remember all the bad things he did.
But I think they will because of the internet. You see what I mean? They can't. They're trying desperately to turn warmongers into Mother Teresa, but it just can't happen because the internet allows us to see the truth. Because it preserves everything.
If you're willing to hear that, sadly, a lot of people aren't willing to hear the truth of what you're saying. They only want the narrative, the nice story. They want to go back to the movies. They just call it the news. So that's a really sad thing today. That people are really being lied to. A lot of people know they're being lied to, so they can at least look at the facts and then draw their own conclusions. But a lot of people just swallow the whole thing and think it's the truth.
Well, I think we need directors like you to make movies that can counter the propagandistic movies of the news. You know what I mean? It's like there's a battle between art. It's a battle between art that is trying to pretend to be objective news when all they are. When I look at a broadcast of CBS nightly news, it's just a type of documentary. It's a film. It's portraying reality the way they want to portray it. And you're trying to portray reality when you make a documentary film or a narrative film or a short film, right?
Yeah, I try to make stuff like I was mentioning C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, etc., things like this. These are the kinds of, they're very expensive to make, so I need investors. But I have a story, for example, called Artifact, and it's basically a Renee Girard kind of story. It's about like almost like prehistoric in its scope, and it basically it imagines what it would be like before we had our first human sacrifice. What conditions have to exist for us to have our first human sacrifice?
And for folks in Radio Land, we're talking ancient history now. We're not saying we're doing human sacrifice as we think of it today. We are doing it in government and the way they treat the unborn and people around the world, but you're mentioning it in the kind of classical ancient society way.
Yes.
Just for folks listening, tuning in right now. Go ahead. And so you want to depict what humanity was like before ancient society sacrificed people? Is that what you're saying?
It's kind of like synthesizing the Gerard's theories in a way, so people can see the kind of conditions that have to exist. But it also kind of retells the story of Christ in another way, about human sacrifice and how the state, I mean, at the time you didn't have the state, you had these kind of tribalist kind of societies. Mm-hmm. So, we were discussing mob justice, and that's, kind of like a mob mentality has to exist in a way for that to occur. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree, but mob justice comes in different forms because if you look at a government bureaucracy, oftentimes that's a kind of peer pressure mob mentality that's just been sterilized by their administrative role. I was looking at some of the examples of folks who come on our program who call in from prison for nonviolent crimes. Folks like, we've got a lot of them, Craig Cecil and Rufus Rochelle, shout out to him, and Chad Marks was on yesterday. People who have experienced decades in prison for nonviolent first-time offense. And I always wonder when I listen to them tell their stories, like, out of all the people in the processing of that person's life, right? There's nobody at any step of the way, from the arrest to the trial, to the, Bureau of Prison and all the different bureaucrats. There's nobody along the way that can take responsibility and say, hey, this is a human being, 50 years for a tangential role. They have a 55-year sentence they gave to Weldon Angelos because he allegedly had a firearm in his possession when he had a little trace amount of marijuana. 55-year sentence for that? And you think how many folks are going to church and learning about Jesus, that he says God desires mercy, not sacrifice, and they're just sitting in this bureaucratically kind of mob mentality of just doing nothing because I'm just doing my job, right? So that's one form of the crowd. The other form is what we saw chasing after Senator Rand Paul and many others. Another form of the crowd is kind of, what we do when we, go off and blockade a country like Yemen on behalf of Saudi Arabia. And we say, well, we're not responsible for the starvation. No, you are. You know what I mean? You have to take it personal. And that's one of the things that Jesus allows us to do, doesn't he?
Yeah, they hide behind the ceremony of government. Kind of like taking a drug. Like when they used to engage in human sacrifice back in the day, they would often take drugs. Yeah, and this would kind of like numb their humanity in a way. Yeah, and numb their conscience. And we do the same thing. When we have all these rituals of government. Not that due process is a bad thing. That's not what I'm saying. But there are also things that can dehumanize.
Well, people. One thing, that's a great point. One thing I see clearly to me when you just mentioned that is one of the drugs we use is politically correct speech. As long as you say, oh, I'm for the people and I'm for social justice, and they use all the right language like Kamala Harris and all these folks, somehow you're given a pass for locking people up by the millions or thousands or whatever, just going along with mowing over people's humanity. Well, but they say woke, they say problematic. They use all the language of the woke people, so therefore it's like a drug. Like, oh, look, they're lulling me to sleep with this rhetorical, ninjutsu or aikido, and meanwhile they're hiding the victims of the perpetual status quo of a meat grinder that is big government. John, I want you to hold on for just a moment. We're going to take a quick break. We'll return with John Croft, filmmaker in the St. Petersburg area. You can follow him. We'll get his information when we return in just a moment. Stay tuned. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Hello, this is David Granosky, host of A Neighbor's Choice. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute, on my program each week, dissecting the news and making the case for freedom, capitalism, and a family-friendly society. Now you can join Jeff and I this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event at the Azalea Lodge in the Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Noted scholar Dr. Patrick Newman and Jeff Deist will provide a fun pre-election discussion along with light refreshments. You've heard Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute. It's just $20 to get in, and space is limited. Join us this Saturday at 9 a.m. at Azalea Lodge at Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Go to Mises.org to register. That's Mises.org. See you there this Saturday, August 29th at 9 a.m. for a fascinating Mises meetup event. Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Granosky, your host. As you may have heard in the break, we've got a great Mises meetup event, which will be tomorrow, Saturday, 29th, 9 a.m. It starts at the Mead Botanical Gardens in Winter Park. Hope to see you there, and I'm planning to go to Fogo de Chão that evening, and I want to make sure I see you guys join me there too. Great Brazilian steakhouse in the Orlando area there, International Drive, wonderful place if you like Brazilian steaks, which I do, you know. I enjoy steaks, and I look forward to seeing you join me there, Fogo de Chão in Orlando. And I'm joined now by John Croft, who's a filmmaker and a friend, producer and director. John, how can people stay in touch with your work before we, depart here?
Well, I'm actually the head of Film Bar Mondays, which is where we met, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, right. A bunch of auteurs and filmmakers and screenwriters and all kinds of guys you got there, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
So we have a group page on Facebook. You can just look up TPA-Film Bar Mondays. TPA is for Tampa. It's kind of like the Tampa Bay area chapter of Film Bar Mondays, which comes from Atlanta, which they have a pretty nice film community there. And it's where I was inspired to bring it down here because we need more community, you know?
Yeah, we have a comment on our YouTube channel. Janet says, I have an idea for you in reference to your idea about making a movie showing
wonderful
the roots of primitive human sacrifice that Jesus set us free from. She says it's about one group of cave dwellers. It's a simple way of explaining how we turn a person into a minor god before speech. Interesting idea, Janet. Thanks for sharing that. So that's the thing, John, you know, we've got a really interesting community that's developed. And I just did a podcast, a new episode of Things Hidden with my friend Shannon Braswell. And it was a wonderful discussion. He's a great thinker, great historical mind, loves the same things that we're interested in. And he was
check that out.
Yeah, it'll be out this weekend. Things Hidden. You can visit on our website at neighborschoice.com. But one of the things he was saying, John, that I thought about you in relationship now is he was saying we need to have churches. Churches need to be creating science labs for people to be doing experiments and learning and growing, because science comes from a love of your neighbor and a love of individual personal responsibility, that you can question groupthink, that you can challenge the sacred cows like Jesus challenged in his own time, including things that are considered settled science in the field of physics or chemistry or whatever. He said churches should be having labs where they're funding, you know, bold research to make the world a better place. And I thought, what an interesting idea, you know, John, that we could think of church that way, because that's exactly how church should be. It should be a community bedrock for everybody.
Absolutely.
And I was thinking at the same time, you've got a lab, you know, the idea of churches helping science progress, but then you have the artist like you. You're a Christian and you're trying to depict the truth of the world as you understand it and do it in ways that people can understand through narrative.
That's right.
What's the narrative that we can tell to help heal this country from the addictive nature of collective violence and reliance on politics?
Wow, what a question.
I can't give you an easy one.
It's already in the scriptures, brother.
Well, how do we okay, you're right. Yeah, so that's an easy answer. But how do we tell that story in a way that it actually, you know, tells it truthfully, right? Because there's a lot of ways to take the gospel and the Bible and to twist it to justify doing terrible things, which history has shown. So how do we effectively tell the truth as revealed in the role model life of Jesus? How do we begin to do that, you know, in our time today?
I do think we have to have a real love of truth. And I think you have to subject yourself to truth in a way that I think most people won't. But I think when you subject yourself to truth, then truth reveals you who you are. So it's kind of a self-discovery. I think for every artist, there's self-discovery in what they're learning about life, and some think of it as an exorcism for artists. They're going through something difficult or hard. They need healing. They turn to art. I spent a good 5 to 10 years pursuing music because every time I did, I was healing from past relationships or past difficulties. There's a personal element, just like there is to your salvation. There's a very personal element to art, and that the artist is going through as they create true art. That is, they're going through something that they have to be very honest about with themselves. And some people find that really hard to do. And I think many of those people are artists, and they have to go through this whole process to subject themselves to God's truth, you know, as opposed to their own truth. So I don't know if I can say it better than the gospel, but I am striving and learning to do it in ways that can reach people, like through Mythopoeia, through these other tales, through Artifact, the one I'm working on, and I'm hoping a documentary maybe. In fact, you should really work on a documentary, David.
Well, don't give away the spoilers yet. All right, John, that's it. We'll have a great weekend, John, and great weekend to our listeners here loyally here around Sunshine State, Florida. And email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. We'll see you next week. Godspeed.